The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. Papers rustled softly as the single dad slid a worn, creased page across the polished mahogany table. His voice was low, almost tender, as he said, "Read the last page." The CEO, power dressed, diamond confidence glittering, chuckled under her breath, amused by what she thought was a desperate ploy. Her laughter echoed off marble walls like the sound of victory. But then her own lawyer picked up the page. His face drained of color, lips parting in a silent gasp, eyes darting to hers like a man staring at a ghost. Ethan Cole sat in the corner of the cavernous courtroom, his calloused hands resting on his knees, the sleeves of his thrift store shirt rolled to the elbows. The world thought men like him didn't belong here, men who worked 2 jobs, men who smelled faintly of motor oil and detergent, men who didn't speak unless spoken to. He wasn't a man who belonged in the glittering orbit of Vanessa Lang, CEO of Lang Corp, a woman who could sign a check worth more than his entire life and still not blink. But here he was. And there she was. Vanessa sat across from him like a queen at her throne. Sharp black suit, hair sleek and polished, a cold smile playing on crimson lips. She didn't just walk into rooms, she conquered them. The case had dragged on for months. Her lawyers, 3 of the best money could buy, had buried him in motions, paperwork, and deadlines. This was supposed to be the final hearing, the day she crushed him completely. It wasn't even about money anymore. It was about custody, about Lily, his daughter. The only reason he woke up in the morning, he had already lost so much, the house, the car, the savings. Vanessa had claimed he was unfit, that his modest life couldn't provide Lily the education, the environment she deserved. And the court had listened, because that's what courts did when they saw a billionaire CEO and a broke single dad in the same room. He'd sat through weeks of her smirking, a lawyer slicing him apart with polite cruelty, painting him as irresponsible, unstable, and unworthy. And through it all, Ethan said nothing. Because what he had, he saved for last. When the judge called for final statements, Vanessa's lawyer stood first, every word dripping confidence. "Your Honor, my client simply seeks what is best for the child. Mr. Cole's financial instability is undeniable. He works nights. He cannot afford the lifestyle a child like Lily deserves. Lang Corp can provide her with everything: education, security, a future." Vanessa smiled faintly, eyes glinting as if victory was inevitable. Then Ethan stood. His knees cracked softly, his worn shoes squeaking against the polished floor. He didn't have a fancy speech, no theatrics, just a folder in his hand. The judge tilted her head. "Mr. Cole," the judge said gently, "you may proceed." Ethan walked slowly to the table, placed the folder down, and looked straight at Vanessa. For the first time in months, his voice carried something that made the room still. "Read the last page," he said quietly, sliding the paper across. Vanessa laughed. It was soft at first, then bolder, a sound of disbelief. "Really? After all this is what you bring?" she said, glancing at her lawyer as if to share the joke. But her lawyer didn't laugh. He picked up the page, eyes scanning quickly. The color drained from his face like ink fading in water. His lips parted, trembling. Then he looked at her, horror flashing in his gaze. "Vanessa," he whispered, voice cracking. This changes everything." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice sharp. And then he turned the page so she could see. Vanessa stared at the paper, her manicured fingers hovering above it as if touching it might burn. The laughter died on her lips, replaced by something jagged and unsure. For the first time since this case began, the mask of perfect composure cracked. Her lawyer cleared his throat, fumbling for words, but they wouldn't come. He was a man who had demolished men like Ethan for sport, who had argued billion-dollar deals with a smile. But now, his lips trembled like a rookie. "Explain." Vanessa hissed under her breath, her eyes narrowing into shards of ice. The lawyer swallowed. It's a legal guardianship clause." What?" "From Lang Corp's own charter," he whispered, voice strangled. "Section 14C. You signed it personally." Vanessa blinked. The words on the paper blurred for a moment before snapping into clarity. It wasn't possible. She had been so careful, so precise. That clause? How could it have surfaced? Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there like a man who had weathered 1,000 storms and finally saw sunlight breaking through the clouds. His silence was louder than any speech, his calmness cutting deeper than any insult. Vanessa gripped the paper, scanning the words. Each sentence struck like a blow. In the event of any claim to custody of a minor where said minor is legally related to an employee of Lang Corp, she froze. Her heart hammered. And where such employee has fulfilled the minimum tenure requirement of 12 years, the corporation recognizes said employee as a primary guardian in cases of contested custody. The room tilted for a moment. Lily's mother, Vanessa's sister, had worked at Lang Corp for 13 years before she died. Her signature was on every contract, and there it was, in ink that could not be erased: Ethan Cole, emergency contact, named guardian. The clause didn't just favor him, it obliterated her claim. Vanessa's lawyer pinched the bridge of his nose, breathing hard. "If this stands, Your Honor," he said finally, voice subdued, "or case is void. The child's legal guardian is Mr. Cole, not my client." The judge raised her brows, leaning forward. "Is this true, Ms. Lang?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came. Ethan reached into his folder again, pulling out a single photo and placing it gently on the table. It was Lily holding a crayon drawing of a stick figure family, a little girl in the middle, Ethan on one side, her mother on the other. Above it, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words: "My daddy loves me." Ethan finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't come here to fight for money or for pride," he said. "I came here because Lily already lost one parent. I won't let her lose another, not to someone who treats her like a trophy." Vanessa felt heat rise to her face, anger clawing at her throat, but beneath it was something else. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. The judge tapped her pen against the bench, eyes sharp as steel. "Ms. Lang, do you contest the validity of this clause?" Vanessa's lips parted. She could lie, she could deny it. But the clause wasn't just legal, it was public record. And if this went to the media, her lawyer's pale face said it all. "Don't fight this." For the first time, Vanessa Lang didn't feel like a CEO, she felt small. Ethan picked up the photo and tucked it back in his folder. His eyes met hers, not with triumph, not with gloating, but with something worse: pity. And that somehow cut deeper than any defeat. The courtroom buzzed like a shaken beehive. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, pens scratching furiously. Vanessa could feel the weight of every gaze, the invisible cameras in their eyes recording every twitch, every breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had built an empire on control, on anticipating moves before they were made. Yet here she sat, blindsided by a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a folder of truths. Her lawyer leaned close, voice a low hiss. "We can request a recess. Buy time, damage control." But Vanessa barely heard him. Her ears roared with the memory of signing that clause years ago, back when Lang Corp was just climbing into the stratosphere. It was a PR move. A family-first policy meant to humanize the company. She had smiled for photos as she signed it, promising to protect the families of her employees. And now, that signature had turned on her like a venomous snake. The judge's voice sliced through her haze. "Mr. Cole, do you have anything further to present?" Ethan shook his head. "No, Your Honor. That page says everything." The judge nodded slowly, eyes scanning the document. "This clause appears valid. I'll need to review precedent, but its language is clear. Mr. Cole retains guardianship rights." A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa gripped the edge of the table, nails biting into the polished wood. She could feel her empire cracking, not because of a merger gone wrong or a hostile takeover, but because of a child with crayon drawings and a man who refused to give up. Ethan sat down, folding his hands in his lap. He didn't look at her again. That somehow stung more than if he had smirked in victory. She wanted him to gloat, to prove he was as small as she believed. Instead, he just sat there, quiet and resolute, as if all the wealth and power in the world were meaningless compared to one little girl. The judge announced a short recess before rendering a decision. Vanessa rose on trembling legs and swept toward the private conference room, her lawyer trailing behind like a condemned man. The moment the door clicked shut, her mask shattered. "What the hell happened?" she snapped, whirling on him. He held up his hands. "Vanessa, listen, this isn't something we can spin. That clause is ironclad. If you fight it, the press will have a field day. CEO ignores her own family first policy to rip child from father. That's not a headline you survive. Vanessa paced the room, heels stabbing the carpet like daggers. There has to be a way. I can't just lose. Sometimes the only winning move, he said carefully, is to stop playing. She froze, turning to him. You want me to give up? I want you to live to fight another day, he said softly. Because if you push this, you'll lose more than custody. You'll lose Langcorp. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Vanessa felt it fraying inside her, the need to win, the hunger that had driven her to claw her way to the top. She wasn't used to walls she couldn't break through. But this wall wasn't made of steel or stone. It was made of something far stronger, love. She hated how poetic that sounded. She hated that it was true. When the recess ended, Vanessa walked back into the courtroom like a soldier returning to a battlefield she knew she couldn't win. The weight of the world sat heavy on her shoulders, but her face was carved from marble once more. The judge raised her gavel. Court is reconvened, and in that heartbeat before the verdict, Vanessa Lang made her choice. The judge's voice carried through the hushed courtroom, clear and unyielding. Based on the evidence and the guardianship clause presented, the court recognizes Mr. Ethan Cole as the legal guardian of Ina Lily Cole. Custody will remain with him. The gavel struck like thunder. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, the breath he'd been holding finally slipping free. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table, not from fear anymore, but from relief so sharp it almost hurt. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't filled with courtrooms and deadlines and sleepless nights wondering if Lily would still be his by morning. Vanessa sat frozen, her expression unreadable. No one moved. Cameras flashed from the gallery like distant lightning, catching every angle of her silence. She could feel the headlines forming, sharp as knives. CEO loses custody battle in stunning courtroom twist. But she didn't care about the headlines. Not right now. What haunted her was the photo Ethan had shown, the crude little drawing, the uneven letters. My daddy loves me. That simplicity, that raw truth, it was something no empire could buy. The judge rose and left the bench. The court adjourned. Voices exploded like a dam breaking, reporters shouting questions, lawyers whispering frantic strategies. But in the center of it all, Ethan stood in stillness. He gathered his folder, his hands almost reverent as he tucked the photo inside. As Vanessa turned to leave, her eyes brushed against his. For a moment, the battlefield between them dissolved. She saw him not as an obstacle, not as a man she had crushed in depositions, but as a father who had fought with everything he had for someone he loved more than life. And in that fleeting second, she envied him. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun spilled gold across the steps. Reporters swarmed like vultures, microphones thrust forward, questions sharp as claws. Vanessa ignored them, descending the stairs with her lawyer shadowing her. The cameras captured her perfectly. Head high, jaw set, the picture of composure. They wouldn't know she was bleeding inside. That was her gift, never let them see you fall. Ethan exited minutes later, his movements slower, careful. When Lily spotted him waiting by the bench, her small figure clutching a stuffed rabbit, she bolted into his arms. He knelt, scooping her up, burying his face in her hair as tears burned his eyes. She whispered, voice muffled against his shoulder, "Do I get to come home now?" Ethan laughed, broken and beautiful all at once. "Yeah, baby. You're coming home." Vanessa saw them from across the plaza, father and daughter tangled in a hug so fierce it seemed to bend time. For one wild, aching second, she wondered what her life would have been like if she had chosen love over power, family over ambition. But regrets were luxuries she didn't allow herself. She turned away, her heels clicking against the marble as she walked toward the black car waiting at the curb. Cameras flashed. The world would spin its stories. She would survive. She always did. Behind her, Ethan carried Lily down the courthouse steps, her laughter ringing like bells against the city noise. He didn't look back, because some wars are worth every scar. And this one he had won.